they're the ones who suffer and die when people like Mark Esper and Mark Milley don't obey the commander-in-chief's orders.
We're talking about Donald Trump and what he says.
Yes. And
Donald Trump says...
And you'd much rather talk about what Donald Trump allegedly said than what Donald Trump did in office.
What he did in
office, Jake,
what he said publicly,
1.5%
he wants to use
inflation.
The military to go after the enemy within, which is the American people.
He did not say that, Jake.
The enemy
he
within?
Said that he was going to send the military after the American people. Show me the quote where he said
he was going to. He said the enemy within.
He said far left lunatics. He's talking
like
about
the
people
Pelosi's
rioting
and Schiff.
He's talking about.
I'm telling you, I cannot wait till this election season is over. This is being dragged out. People are getting too emotionally attached. A lot of people are being split. Friendships are ending. Where can I start? Where can we end with this? You understand what I'm saying? I'm sure you guys are experiencing the same thing at this point. With that being said, we're about to sit back and react to Jake Tapper and JD Vance sparring over John Kelly. Let's see how this is about to play out. Sit back and react with your boy. If you like reactions like this, consider hitting that like button. Definitely subscribe to the channel and also hit the notification bell. Let's see how this is about to play out.
Senator Vance, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So let me ask you, obviously, Trump's former Chief of Staff, General John Kelly, was alarmed, he says, by what he heard when Trump said he wanted to use the National Guard or the Pentagon to go after the enemy within, Americans with whom he disagrees, including the Pelosi's, Adam Schiff. And then he gave an interview. He said that Trump, quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, that he is, quote, certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. You've called him a disgruntled former employee. But why shouldn't Americans out there listen to somebody who worked closely with Trump, worked with him longer than you've worked with him, retired 4-star Marine general, served his country honorably, who is conservative, who says he agrees with Trump on most policies, but is worried about this aspect of Trump?
So let me say two things in response. So first of all, a lot of what John Kelly, pretty much all of what John Kelly accuses Donald Trump of saying, there were other people in the room, Mike Pence's former chief of staff, for example, who've explicitly said Donald Trump never said those things, right? So one, on
Mike
the specific
Pence, the guy
comments,
who's not going to support Trump because...
Mike Pence's former chief of staff said that Donald Trump didn't say those things, right? So that's number one. Number two, I actually think there's an interesting conversation here to have, Jake, which is why does John Kelly not support Donald Trump? It's about policy. It's actually not about personality.
He says he agrees with Trump on most policy.
No.
He agrees with Trump on most policy. He disagrees with Trump on how Trump views his role and his and the fascism and the authoritarianism.
I don't buy that, Jake. I don't buy that, because if you actually look at John Kelly, at folks like Liz Cheney, the fundamental disagreement they have with Donald Trump is, even though they say that they're conservative in the sense that they want America to get involved in a ton of ridiculous military conflicts. They want America to police the world, and Donald Trump wasn't.
John Kelly lost a son in Afghanistan. Why are you saying that he, like, I've never heard John Kelly say whether he supports of Iraq or Afghanistan.
And I honor his son's sacrifice, and I honor his family's sacrifice. That doesn't mean he's not wrong about policy.
What specifically are you talking about? What has he said?
Is your argument that a person who lost a son in Afghanistan can't be wrong about public policy?
I'm asking you.
Why bring that up? Let's talk about public policy, because I've never criticized his service or his son's service.
I brought it up because you're acting as if he is pro-war, and I've never heard him say whether or not he supported the war in Afghanistan or the war in Iraq. He was a general carrying out orders.
Now, here's the difference, right? Like, I pay attention to everything. It seems like he's being attacked, but we all know he's never rushing his interviews. He can stay on these interviews for as long as the host needs him to be there. You understand what I mean? So now, when they go in on Kamala, the only reason why they're doing that is because she actually locks in a time and let them know, listen, we're not gonna exceed this time. So, you know, imagine you write 100 questions. Now you got to minimize it and you got to be fast with it, because you already know she's going to do a lot of filibuster moments and you want to get beyond that point so you can get down to the meat. You understand what I'm saying? Pause. With that being said, this right here, it seems like people already be biased before they even get the questions prepared. It seems like they're already biased.
I know John Kelly's worldview, and I know the people who have attacked Donald Trump the most vociferously on foreign policy. They'll say, well, he's a dictator, when what they really mean is they won't listen. Donald Trump wouldn't listen to the leadership of the military when they wanted him to start ridiculous conflicts. That is a consistent theme. And I think that there's a big, big thing going on in American politics. It's a very interesting theme in American foreign policy where a lot of former members of the Pentagon bureaucracy, a lot of old neoconservatives, they have a fundamental difference with Donald Trump on the question of peace and war. I believe Donald Trump is the candidate of peace. I think the record supports that. But the reason these guys go after him so vociferously, I don't think that it's about his personality, Jake. I think that it's about they don't like that Donald Trump said no when a lot of them wanted to start a ridiculous war.
Well, you're ascribing worldviews, I think, based on gut. I can't really tell where you're coming from on it. There's no evidence.
Based on people that I've talked to in the Trump administration,
sure, John
about
Bolton,
what John Kelly wanted to do, John Bolton, Liz Cheney, these people have a consistent
John Kelly
worldview.
was at the Department of Homeland Security, and then he was chief of staff. He was not weighing in. I don't even know what you're talking about. But let me ask you something about John Kelly specifically, because you said the other day, quote, I guarantee John Kelly talked to somebody on Kamala Harris's campaign beforehand, before he did this interview. Now, I've spoken with people in John Kelly's circle, and I've spoken with people in the Kamala Harris campaign. They say there's been no communication the entire time. So where did that come from?
Oh, I'm highly skeptical of that, Jake. You know the way that these attacks work. You know the way that these people are often vetted by a campaign.
So you made it up.
Before something goes out there. No, I said that the American media and the American Democratic Party apparatus works a certain way. If it comes out that John Kelly never even spoke with a person in the Kamala Harris orbit, then I'm happy. You're telling me that based on secondhand conversations with John Kelly. And it's interesting. We've now spent, Jake, 3 minutes talking about John Kelly. If it is true that he never spoke with anyone in Kamala Harris's orbit, I'm happy to apologize to John Kelly for misstating how he delivered this news to the Atlantic magazine.
You see that now? This is how you handle stuff. This is how you become presidential. You understand? Like he said, he is willing to take accountability. But for right now, he knows it's all smoke and mirrors. You understand? But the host, he insists. And with that being said, that is where the bias comes from. You get what I mean? It's unfair. So the game is always rigged.
But let's talk about who did he deliver this news to? To Jeffrey Goldberg, a guy who lied the United States into the Iraq War, which led to the deaths of millions of innocent Arabs and thousands of innocent Americans. You don't go to that guy if you don't have a particular ideological motive. I think that's what's going on. If I'm wrong, I'm happy to say that I'm wrong.
I think it's interesting that you think that a magazine writer lied the American people into war.
Well, he encouraged it. He wrote stories that were dishonest.
He wrote a story about the gassing of the Kurds in I forget if it was the Atlantic or the New Yorker, but I'm actually referring to John Kelly talking to the New York Times.
He wrote stories, by the way, where he took what intelligence officials in the American Pentagon bureaucracy said and wrote it as the gospel truth. And this highlights the entire point that I'm making about Trump's foreign policy, is this is a guy who wants to use American troops sparingly. He wants peace through strength. It's why his foreign policy was so successful during his first term. It's all the same people who were wrong about Iraq. They were wrong about the quagmire in Afghanistan. They were wrong about Syria. They were wrong about everything. And now they're coming after Donald Trump because he actually has a realistic and cautious foreign policy.
I'm talking about people who worked for Donald Trump in his first administration. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not just John Kelly, but Mark Milley, who was the Trump-appointed chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Who disobeyed Trump's direct orders on troop redeployments in Syria.
And I'm talking about the guy that had your job.
A massive violation of his constitutional oath, by the way.
I'm talking about the guy that had your job before Donald Trump's supportive crowd wanted to hang him, Vice President Mike Pence, who said, as you know, that Trump put himself before the Constitution. I'm talking about General Mattis, also Secretary of Defense in Trump's administration. I'm talking about Mark Esper, the Secretary of Defense, who told me that Trump does have fascistic tendencies. John Bolton, H.R. McMaster, Alyssa Farah-Griffin.
Okay, Jake,
these are Trump administration officials.
Listen to every Trump administration official? You know, one reason why Kamala Harris doesn't have as many people criticizing her is because she doesn't fire people who fail. That's why we haven't had a real audit of the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal.
So basically, it sounds like a bunch of disgruntled employees. You understand? I mean, many former employees are always going to have something negative to say. You know, you call them Negative Nancy. You know, if you look at reviews today, someone is going to always have something to say. They have their own experiences, and what they're going to say that has to be negative has to only do with them. You understand? It's not a universal one size fits all. You got to be careful when people are out here spewing things like this.
Is because Kamala Harris protects failures in government. Donald Trump fires them. And I'd much rather have the president who fires people who screw up. Now, Jake, no, this is an important point. Kamala Harris.
You did not fire Mike Pence.
Kamala Harris.
He did not fire Mark Milley.
Kamala Harris.
He did not fire John.
He fired a lot of those people, Jake, and he did because they weren't doing their job. But this is the thing, Jake. We've now spent 5 minutes talking about people in Donald Trump's staff
who think he's not fit for office.
He fired.
Who think he's not fit for
office.
Oh, they didn't think he was unfit for office until they had a falling out with him because he fired them. And we're not talking about the public policy.
Well,
we're actually talk about how Americans can't afford groceries.
We're actually
Can we talk about the fact that Americans can't afford the cost of housing?
We're actually
Can we talk
talking
about the fact that a lot of people out there in Erie, Pennsylvania, they're the ones who suffer and die when people like Mark Esper and Mark Milley don't obey the commander-in-chief's orders.
We're talking about Donald Trump and what he says.
Yes.
And Donald Trump says...
And you'd much rather talk about what Donald Trump allegedly said than what Donald Trump did in office.
I'm talking about
what he did in office, Jake,
what he said publicly.
1.5%
he wants to use
inflation.
The military to go after the enemy within, which is the American people.
He did not say that, Jake.
The enemy
he
within?
Said that he was going to send the military after the American people. Show me the quote where he said
he was going to. He said the enemy within.
He said far left lunatics. He's talking
like
about
the
people
Pelosi's
rioting
and shit.
Listen, we the people know who Trump is talking about. I hope that you the people understand what's really going on over here. When he made that comment, I didn't think in my mind, oh, he's gonna come after me. I don't believe it. I don't see it. I mean, he can't become a dictator. He was a president already. I didn't see any signs of dictatorship. Have you experienced dictatorship? No, right? You were still able to go to work. Nothing stopped you from that, right? You was able to go to your doctor, right? No one was stopping you, correct? All right, so listen, fear-mongering works so well against emotional people and the ignorance. You understand? Never forget that right there.
He's talking about people rioting after the election. I think
the Pelosi's were rioting after the election?
He said...
Adam Schiff was rioting after the election?
You're using two separate phrases. He said about using the military that far-left lunatics, people who riot in the wake of an election, people who burn down American cities in the summer of 2020, yes, we should have a federal law enforcement
This is what
response.
he said to Joe Rogan on Friday. The enemy within that he wants the military to go after.
No, this is the
enemy
thing.
within a bigger problem than Kim Jong-un.
The second part.
We have people that are really bad people that I really think want to make this country unsuccessful. That's who the enemy within.
And did he say that he wants to use the military against those people?
He here's the game. Use the military to go after the enemy within.
Here's the game that you're playing. He said
I'm not playing a game.
No. Can I answer the question, please? He said that he wanted to use the military to go after far left lunatics who are rioting, and he also called them the enemy within. He separately, in a totally different context, in a totally different conversation, said that Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff were threats to this country.
Were the enemy within.
Were
the enemy within. He said they were the enemy within.
So every time he uses the exact same phrase, we assume that he uses
I don't know. I don't throw around the term of enemy within to talk about using the military against going American people.
And you're asking his vice president, but you won't let me answer the question. I'm telling you that Donald Trump has said, and I agree with him, that we should use the U.S. military to go after
Americans.
People who riot, who burn down our cities.
And this was what John Kelly was.
National Guard.
This was what John Kelly was alarmed by: the idea of using the U.S. military to go after Americans. That's what he said.
Donald Trump never said Americans writ large. You keep on putting words in his mouth and my
Are they
mouth.
or are they not Americans?
Wow. So the guy's assuming and making his own allegations. You understand what I mean? At this point, look, we know that he's not attacking the people. We know who he's going after. Listen, it's a political game. At the end of the day, the civilians will pay for it, but we really have no meat on the bone. Pause, no diddy. Yeah, this is different right here. This host, he keeps trying to bring back old wounds, if you ask me. And at the same time, it's not constructive. It's not helping. What is the purpose of this interview? It seems like it's only to bash the right.